And then the viewing would be on Wednesday from 7 to 8.
Our next door neighbors are the children's godparents and our babysitters, and they're with our kids as much as we are, perhaps. And on the days that we're not busy, we have plenty of time to ourselves. So.
There really is no typical day.
Yeah,
some days we're very busy, and some days we're not.
Out cutting the grass and doing things with the kids and having a normal life, and other days we're running from hither to thither.
If I'm on an airplane flying somewhere for a social gathering with my wife and the guy across the aisle says, starts striking up a conversation and we're having a great time, we're hitting it off, we like eat, we share a lot of the common interests, and then he'll say something like, and what do you do for a living? And then I'll say, oh, I'm a funeral director. Oh, I guess someone's got to do it, and then that sort of ends the conversation.
Brookings, South Dakota, population 16,270. They have 2 funeral homes in town. The Eidsness Funeral Home and its 3 satellite branches perform 100 funerals a year.
A lot of people think of a funeral director and the first thing they say is, how can you do that? And when they say, how can you do that, what they're thinking about right away is the image of working on a dead human body. Now, I have some strong feelings about that, and my strong feelings is number one, that's a very small part of our job. Funeral directors are working with living people. Ours is a people service. But on the other hand, that small percentage of our time that's actually spent in preparation for burial, preparation of the body for burial, is important.
The first 5 years of my married life, I could count on the fact that if we went to a party and I didn't know the people, people would be congregating around me saying, "You do what for a living?" And now people are used to seeing me and they know who I am. And I think when you're a generation into it, or a second generation, you don't grow up looking like a funeral director if he looks like a funeral director.
I think that it's only been in the late years that, with the age, that I look like a funeral director, because time and again in the past, they used to say, "I can't believe that you're a funeral director." Mm-hmm. Because when we're off duty, we dress a little differently too, and we relax a little bit more in a dignified sort of way. You always have to keep that dignity up there,
Kristen Frederick and her father are part of a family line of funeral directors in Albany, New York, that can be traced back to 1863. From this one location, they service 250 families a year.
I don't think it is depressing, because I think this is where this little spark inside of you comes into play. If you reach inside and give out to others, the nicest thing that can happen is that they appreciate that giving. And it's a give and take.
A good funeral director never gets used to or hardened to grief. We live and we work in the community along with everyone else, and when tragedy strikes or we have friends that are hurting, it's difficult for us.
The difficulties began when Mama died. She didn't have much money. We wanted a nice funeral. We all felt we knew exactly what Mama wanted, and everyone's opinion was different.
As business people, funeral directors look at their customers as pre-need, where you make all your arrangements before you die.
She doesn't forget, and it makes
at
it easier
need,
for her
during the time of death, and aftercare.
At Eidsness Funeral Home, we're there long after the funeral, with visits, calls, and cards, with support groups, and with educational programs. We remember because we care.
Memories will last forever.
It's a natural thing that every business, I believe, is out to get customers, but we don't have the opportunities that the supermarkets have, or any of the other kind of stores. We can't put out a sale or anything like that.
The public expects funeral homes to be progressive in their thinking and progressive in their marketing. I think that there's a fine line between what is tasteful marketing and what, for example, I can't imagine a funeral home that would have, say, on a TV ad, pictures of 5 different caskets with a sale price on the caskets.
Funeral service was sort of a quiet and dark situation for years, and people never knew what was going on. They just accepted what it is. Today, They prefer to know just exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when it's going to happen.
Just as wedding services have changed so that couples exchange vows that they have written that are appropriate for them, funerals have become the same way, and beautifully so. If we have the funeral of an artist, we request that we have that artwork or some of the pieces of artwork, which we then display or intersperse with flowers depending upon the type of service we're having, so that a funeral becomes a celebration of the life of the person who has lived and not the death of the person.
When there's a death, you only have one chance to do the funeral. You can't a week later, you know, families don't come back to me a week later and say, Mr. Eidsness, I think we want to do that again. They all have a mattress and then there's a spring underneath it, if you look at it like that. A lot of people.
The future of the family-run funeral home may be that of the corner grocer. A small percentage of funeral homes are being purchased by regional partnerships and international funeral corporations, one of which already owns 3% of the funeral homes in the United States. Rose Funeral Home still bears his name, but is owned and operated by a small conglomerate.
It's a definite trend. And it's a trend that a lot of people, both lay people and funeral service professionals, are accepting reluctantly or consider it a negative trend in the industry.
You're finding less follow-up in the families than you used to. A funeral home director today may have 2 or 3 children in the family, and maybe one of them might follow through. Maybe he won't. Maybe he won't have any. Then what is he going to do? It almost happened to me. Several years ago, I was considering terminating my funeral home there until Kristen suddenly came to me, and those were the days when we felt that women had no part in funeral service. See, this goes back maybe 15, 18 years on. But when Kristen came to me, it was a godsend, believe me.
I can find myself in the same position. I mean, I'm 45, and I have 2 children, both of which want to be veterinarians. They don't want any part of funeral service. And so at some point in time, looking at what the other options are is going to be worthy of consideration to me.
Maybe, even though to some people the decision may have seemed premature, maybe it was sort of we're taking the gamble. And we'll talk again in 14 years and see how it paid off.
It's going to change, there's no question about it. I can see it. I can see the handwriting on the wall.
A few months after the taping of this interview, the Frederick Funeral Home became part of Service Corporation International, the world's largest funeral home chain. A coffin is a 6-sided receptacle that is still used in many countries today. Just before the Civil War, Almond Fisk improved upon the wooden box by inventing an airtight, waterproof, cast iron container that was actually manufactured by a stove company.
He had a brother who died on a trip to Mississippi, but they had no way to return his brother to New York. They had to bury him in Mississippi. So he thought if he had a container made that was absolutely undissolvable, indestructible, and it would exclude the air, that the body could be shipped because it would not be obnoxious to anyone and it would tend to preserve the body. The Fisk coffin started out in the shape of a mummy case. It was mummiiform. This was a little hard for the American to swallow. They thought it was a little bizarre. So they simplified its lines, and it gradually assumed, first during the Civil War period, a smooth side, tapered coffin shape, and in the post-war period it became even more straight-sided, and eventually it lost any relationship to the coffin shape.